you are in a privileged position. Most people out there, they hear about all of these things once they've made all their decisions, and then they're living in what is a prison. But you haven't. You have your whole life ahead of you. You can decide what occupation, where you want to live, what goals you want to pursue. You can do that. And you can set your, but remember that archer has to pull back before it shoots. And therefore, forums like this are incredibly empowering, because you can set a conscious direction for your life and do something amazing. Thank you everyone for coming. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Yeah, you can hear me good? Alright, wonderful. So we have a little bit of time this afternoon, and I really appreciate you taking your time out. And we're going to be talking about a very, very interesting topic today, rediscovering identity. And we're going to start, these are like the biggest questions, and what I'm going to try to do today is share with you some of the insights from an ancient literature known as the Bhagavad Gita. Just to get a sense of who's here. Is anyone here at an event like this for like the first time? Like you've never really been to anything like this before? Okay, some of you. Okay, wonderful. Okay, we won't make you do anything embarrassing, don't worry. You can relax. Hopefully there'll be some insights which are relevant to you and which kind of help you in your journey as you go forward. I'm just going to begin by doing a little experiment with you guys, just because today we're talking about identity, and it would be good for me just to know a little bit about my audience, because they say connect before you communicate. So I just want you to write down, if you've got a phone, you can write down your answer to this. You can just write it on a notepad or whatever. Can you write, and I don't want you to overthink this too much, just whatever the first answer comes to your mind. Can you write down your favorite animal and describe it in one word? Why that's your favorite animal? So you might say like lion, courageous. That's not my one, I'm just giving an example there. Yeah, got it? Your favorite animal and describe it in one word, yeah? Okay, great. Question number 2, can you write down your second favorite animal after that one and the one word that describes that? Got it? Excellent, excellent. Okay, question number 3. Can you write down your favorite color and how that makes you feel in one word? Remember, don't overthink it. Just whatever comes to your mind. Okay, got it? Yeah? Okay, now I just want you to close your eyes for a second and imagine you walk into a room which is completely white. The floor's white, the walls are white, the roof is white, the ceiling is white, sorry. Just everything in that room is white, it's completely bare, there's nothing in it, it's just a white room. Just try to picture yourself in that white room. If you were to describe your feeling in one word, what emotion do you feel in that white room? Just in one word. All right, got it? Have any of you done this before? Okay. I've just conducted a deep psychological experiment with each of you. And each of your answers relate to some psychological aspect of yourself. Would you like to know? Okay. Question number 1. I asked you to write down your favorite animal, yeah? Before I tell you what it means, do you want to tell me your answer? Anyone want to share? Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
My first choice was a panda.
Okay, and what one word?
It was funny because I've seen a lot of funny things.
Panda, jovial, funny, fun-loving. Excellent. Someone here? Yeah, go for it.
My favorite animal was a Bengal tiger.
A Bengal tiger, specifically a Bengal tiger. Okay, that's very specific. And?
Royal.
Loyal?
Royal.
Royal.
Yes.
Okay, it's matching. You can think about your answer. It's deeply, in terms of deep psychology, what your answer to this reflects is the way that you see yourself. Is it accurate?
Yes.
Very good. Your second favorite animal? Anyone want to shout out? Yeah. Here we go.
A dog.
A dog? And what's the quality?
Friendly.
Friendly. Excellent.
I said a capybara.
Okay. Excellent. And the quality?
Silly.
Silly. Okay, interesting. This question, according to psychologists, reflects what you look for in your ideal partner. Yeah, I can see a few shocked faces there. It's interesting. I don't know, is this accurate? Are you finding this accurate? Like 80%, 70%?
Sorry, just what is a capybara? A capybara, yes.
Do you want to explain?
I'm not entirely sure how. Think of a mix between a hog and a pig. Some form that they're really cute though.
Right,
Okay, they're really cute. There you go. Okay. The third question, what's your favorite color? Pink. Okay, excellent. And what was the word? Or how does it make you feel? Happy. Amazing. Do you want to say? Yeah. Yeah.
I like blue.
Blue. Okay. Makes you feel comforting, comfortable. Okay, excellent. According to psychology, this question reflects how you think people see you. Accurate? What was your one?
Oh, I said red. It makes me feel hungry.
Hungry? Okay. Do people always give you food or something? Okay, your last one. I asked you about the white room, right? Can you say some of the emotions that you felt in that white room? Yeah? Calm. Anxious. Okay, interesting. Anyone here? What emotion did you feel? Peace. Anyone else? Something different? Yeah? Confused. Interesting. Yeah, at the back.
Confusion as well.
Confused as well. Okay, got two confused people there. This, according to psychologists, reflects your attitude towards death. This is your attitude towards death. So different people, when they think of death, or they think of the end, or they think of, their life terminating, this is what kind of emotion it may bring up within you. Just because I've done this a few times. What would you give that experiment? Like 9 out of 10, 4 out of 10?
9.
It was pretty good, huh? It's pretty good. Okay, excellent. We can give a round of applause to the psychologist who came up with that. I have no idea who it is, but I'm sure it was. Today we're going to be talking about identity, because oftentimes this experiment is interesting because we may have a certain conception of who we are. We may have a certain idea of how people see us. And I think if we were all to put our hand up and I asked you, Like, put your hand up if you feel for a lot of your life that you're not really your real self. Do you feel like that sometimes? That we go through life and we put loads of masks on like this. If I was to ask you, how would you answer this question? What do you think is the hardest and simultaneously the easiest thing to do in the world? How would you answer that? Yeah. Doing nothing. That's it. That's an interesting answer. Any other answers? What do you think is the hardest and simultaneously the easiest thing to do? This can be the hardest and it can also be the easiest. Yeah?
To love.
To love. Wow, another beautiful answer. Brilliant. Yeah.
Tell the truth.
To tell the truth. Okay?
To be yourself.
To be yourself. Thank you very much. Round of applause. Brilliant. Yeah, actually all your answers were really good. But perhaps this is one of the easiest and also the hardest things to do in the world. This is a quote by Mark Twain. And he says, to be yourself in a world that's constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. So sometimes when I don't know have you ever watched a video of yourself? Have you ever heard yourself being recorded, giving a lecture, and then listen to yourself again? And how did you feel? It's kind of a little awkward, yeah. That's on the liberal side, that's the kind side. And you could say sometimes it feels cringing. Because you look at yourself and you think, is that even me? Like, I don't even relate to that person. It sounds like another person. And so sometimes we tell people it's so easy to slip on so many different masks and miss who we really are. And so, although it seems like a really, really simple question, if I ask you, who are you? It's actually a very deep question, because most of us may not have thought very deeply about it. We just kind of accept the identity that people kind of expect us to be. One person, he says, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I'm who I think you think I am. Which is how disconnected from our authenticity we've become. So often, even in the world today, they talk about things like imposter syndrome, where we almost feel like we're doing stuff in this world, but we're kind of like, we're not really being ourselves. So today we're gonna kind of discuss something from this ancient book, the Bhagavad Gita. Can you put your hand up if you're a little bit familiar or you've heard this name before? Okay, like half of you. Excellent. And for those of you that haven't, don't worry. It's a very, very universal book. This language here is a very ancient language. It's called Sanskrit. So Sanskrit is a very, very beautiful language. And it's said that a lot of Indo-European languages that we kind of utilize today are derivations of Sanskrit. So very, very ancient. And it comes from the East. It's dated to about 5,000 years. And it's a short book. It's about 700 stanzas. It said that it took about 45 minutes to speak. It's a conversation between two personalities. This here is Krishna, and this here is a person called Arjuna. Arjuna is on a battlefield, and he's kind of like having all these questions and doubts and confusions in his mind. And the fact that he's on a battlefield is significant, because sometimes, do you feel like your life is a bit of a battlefield? It's like that, right? We have so many different competing responsibilities. We have stress. We have, different sides and different decisions that we have to make. So the battlefield is a very, very amazing setting, because life is like a battlefield. And on a battlefield is very significant, because what happens on a battlefield is two things become really, really important. What you're going to do now, there's an immediate pressure on a battlefield, because if you don't keep your eyes open, someone's going to shoot you and you're going to die. So there's an immediate pressure on the battlefield. But on the battlefield, because death could come at any time, the battlefield is also the place where you question the ultimate things as well. So the Bhagavad Gita is an incredible book because what it deals with is how to immediately act in this life, like tomorrow. It empowers you with techniques of what to do to live a better life now. But the Bhagavad Gita also talks about what is beyond this life, what is beyond this world, what is beyond the material things that we see around us, and whether there's something higher than that. Now, if I was to summarize the Bhagavad Gita, we could summarize it in different ways. But here are some of the topics that are covered in the Bhagavad Gita. In the first chapter, the very first thing that Krishna does is he talks about success. Would you like to be successful? We all want to be successful. But what Krishna explains is that oftentimes what happens is we haven't defined our success. Oftentimes we set goals, we set aspirations, we set a vision for what we want to achieve in our life, but we haven't actually thought of that ourselves. We're just kind of sometimes following along with what society or the world tells us is success. Later on, what Krishna talks about is identity, which we're going to be talking about today. This is kind of going to be our main subject matter today. Later on, Krishna talks about lifestyle. How in this world you have to balance so many things. Do you feel like life is like that? Sometimes we're juggling. You've got your relationships, you've got your work, you've got your spirituality, you've got your, other academic endeavors, so many things. So how do you balance your lifestyle? Krishna also talks about the mind. The mind is one of the most powerful things in the world, and it's also one of the most unknown things in the world. And so Krishna talks about how to empower your mind. He then goes on to talk about love. We're all looking for love. Some of us have found love. Some of us are falling in love. Some of us have lost faith in love. I'm not referring to myself. So we're all looking for love. Krishna talks about that. He also talks about divinity, because sometimes we do. When we look up at the stars at night, we look at the sky and we think, is there more? Is there something beyond this? Is there a higher personality or some kind of intelligence or supreme being? And then Krishna goes back and he comes back to this world and he talks about energy. You sometimes feel like you're being influenced in the world to do things that you don't want to do. Yeah, when was the last time you were doing something and you're like, why am I doing this? And you're saying that while you're doing it. Because sometimes it feels as though there's energies and influences around us which are pushing us to act in a certain way. And then Krishna talks about how to re-enter life with purpose. Does it feel like a relevant book? It's amazing, isn't it? Like sometimes ancient knowledge, which is thousands of years old, and which seems to be spoken in a completely different time, a completely different situation, in a completely different context, still remains so relevant to everything we're going through. So today we're going to talk about identity. And someone may say, why is identity even important? Why is it important to know who we are? Because all of us are looking to be successful in our life. You can imagine an archer who's just about to release an arrow, and that archer, what they're trying to do is hit the bullseye, and the bullseye signifies success. But what's the first thing that an archer will do before releasing the bow? What do you think? You don't have to be an archer to answer this question. Yeah. You aim. And once you've aimed, what's the next thing you do? You release? Do you aim and release, or do you do something before you even release? You draw back, right? So if you want to hit the bullseye, the first thing is you got to draw back, then you got to aim, and then you got to release. But oftentimes what people do in the world is they're looking for success, but before releasing their arrow, they fail to pull back and they fail to aim. So Arjuna is an archer. And so Krishna is like giving him not just a lesson in archery, but he's giving him a lesson in life. He's saying, you're an archer, and as an archer you should know that if you want to hit the bullseye, the first thing you have to do is pull back, the second thing you have to do is aim, and then the third thing you do is release. But what most people do in life is they release without doing those things, and therefore they don't find the success that they're looking for. And so what Krishna says is, if you want to be successful, the first thing is you have to know this, dharma. Has anyone heard this word before, dharma? Yeah? What does dharma mean to you when you hear that word? Purpose. Excellent. Anyone else? Yeah?
Duty.
Duty. Brilliant. Duty. Anyone else? Religion. Yeah. Dharma carries all of these meanings, but probably in the most overarching definition, dharma means your purpose. So Krishna says you can't find success until you first know your purpose. They say the worst type of success is when you fulfill all of your goals and then you realize they were somebody else's goals. Imagine you do that. You'd work hard all your life to fulfill all these goals, and then you fulfill them and you're like, but they weren't my goals. That wasn't my purpose. So we got to find our dharma. We got to find our purpose. And what Krishna says is that you can't find your dharma until you first know who you are. How can you know what your purpose is if you don't know who you are? And so therefore, the very first thing that Krishna addresses in the Bhagavad Gita is identity. So I'm going to share some ideas with you. I think many of you will be familiar with many of these ideas, but I'm going to kind of open it up, and then I'm going to ask you to just later on ask me questions and clarify, does this really resonate with you? Does it make sense? This is one of the very first things that Krishna says to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. I'll say it in Sanskrit just to give you an idea of how that language is a very beautiful language, how it sounds. So Krishna says to Arjuna, Natvevam jatunasham natvam neme janadipa nacheva na bhavishyama sarveva yamata param. So in English, Krishna says to Arjuna, remember they're on a battlefield and there's death all around them. So Krishna says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes to another body at death, and a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. This knowledge is groundbreaking because it can change our entire vision of life. Krishna is basically explaining that there are three elements to our identity. The first thing is that we have a physical body, right? This is made up of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are like what we call gross elements. This is the aspect of our identity that we see when we wake up in the morning and we look in the mirror. Mirror, mirror, on the wall. That's the one that you see, right? That's like the hardware, just like there's a computer here, right? So the first aspect of this computer is the hardware, the monitor and the keyboard and the mouse. That's all hardware. But then Krishna says there's another aspect to our identity, which is the subtle part of who we are. And that is made up of what we call mind, intelligence, and ego. And these are known as subtle elements. Yeah? So you can think about the mind as the software on this computer. So this computer is running Windows, and it has, certain it has a certain interface through which if there's no software, I can't do anything with this computer. And if the software has a virus, then it's, a problem. But Krishna, what he says then in the Bhagavad Gita is that beyond these identities, we're the soul. In other words, you're not your mind. This is a very powerful learning because sometimes so many things go through our mind and we think we are the mind. But you're not the mind. The mind is just a stream of thoughts that's going through. But you're the soul who can actually have the power to observe your own mind. Sometimes I tell people the mind is not the root of consciousness. Consciousness doesn't come from the mind. The mind is the root of consciousness. It's that thing through which the consciousness comes. It's that thing which is utilized by the consciousness. So who are we? We are the soul. And Krishna says the soul has three features. Sat, it's eternal. Chit, which means it's full of knowledge. And Ananda, which means it's full of happiness. Knowledge and also, like we can say, sentience or consciousness. Those are the three qualities of the soul. So you're getting a sense of identity. We have a physical body and a subtle body, but they're like coverings. We're actually the soul which is driving the body. And it kind of makes a lot of sense. Like say for example, how does every single fairy tale in the world, what words does it end with? Yeah, louder. They lived, hopefully. They lived happily ever after. This is how every single fairy tale ends in the world, isn't it? Do we live happily ever after? Well, we all die, right? But it's very interesting, if you look at this, lived refers to chit, that we want to be conscious all the time. Happily refers to ananda, which is that we want to experience bliss. And ever after refers to sat. So even fairy tales, when they end with the words, they lived happily ever after, what they're actually indicating is our deepest identity, which is to live happily ever after. But right now, we're covered by a software and a hardware that's material, and therefore we can't experience that nature of eternality, sentience, and happiness. So it's a little technical, but I think you're with me, right? You're with me so far? Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. So basically, just to drive it home, we have a gross body, we have a subtle body, but we're the soul within. And what basically happens at the time of death, according to the Bhagavad Gita, is that the soul, which is who we are, is carried by the subtle body to another gross body. Now this helps to answer so many questions of life. Sometimes we have so many questions, so many confusions. We look up at the sky and we have so many doubts about life. But if we understand the science of the soul, it can help to answer so many questions. And I'm going to come back to that later on. But so just again to drive it home, this is basically what Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. And so, let me just skip this out. There are different types of consciousness that people can have. The first type of consciousness is waking consciousness. All of us in the room now, I hope, are in waking consciousness. That means you're the soul and you're sentient, you're active, and your subtle body and your physical body right now is active. Agreed? Another type of consciousness is known as, in Sanskrit, svapna, and this is called dreaming consciousness. So this is the type of consciousness that occurs when you go to sleep. When you go to sleep, the consciousness is only going as far as being expressed through your subtle body. That's why when you go to sleep, you generally don't move unless you sleepwalk. But generally your senses are not active. But what is active is still your mind. That's why you dream, right? And then there's another type of consciousness which is known as dreamless sleep, where the soul is present within the body, but the subtle body and the physical body are not activated. Can anyone think of what situation in which this happens? Yeah. We're going to come back to that later. That's another type of consciousness.
Coma.
A coma. Yeah. So say for example someone's in a coma. Then what's happened is they're still in their body, but the subtle and the physical aspects of their being are not actually illumined by consciousness. So most people in the world only know about these three types of consciousness. And for most people in the world, what's happening is there's a pendulum and they're swinging between these two types of consciousness. Sometimes we're awake, sometimes we're asleep. Then we wake up again, then we go to sleep. And basically they're going through these types of consciousness. But what is being explained in spiritual literature is that there's a fourth dimension of consciousness. And that fourth dimension of consciousness is known in Sanskrit as Turiya. And in that fourth dimension of consciousness, one, the soul is acting through the subtle and the physical, but the soul is also understanding that there's a reality, something much beyond this world. And therefore, they don't just see the physicality of the world, but they're seeing what lies beyond all of that. They have vision and comprehension of a much deeper reality. So someone may say, how do we know, is there any evidence for this kind of concept that you're a spiritual being, that you've lived before this life and that you'll live after this life? Is there any evidence for that? So the first thing is we can say, by intuition, we know that we're something beyond the body. When you see something, what is seeing? Is it the eye? Or is it something beyond the eye? When you smell something, what's actually smelling? Is it your nose that's smelling it? Or is it someone or something that's utilizing the machinery of the nose to smell something? Intuitively, we have this understanding that it's not my eye which is seeing. I'm seeing through my eye, right? Who owns? Can I take questions in a bit? Yeah, just hold that question, and then, because I do want you to also challenge me on this. Who owns the body? Even if you look at our language, we say, my body, my mind, my heart, my head, my intelligence. So who's that my? Who's owning all of those things? Just see the way we speak. We have a sense, an intuitive sense that we're something beyond this body. What about when someone dies? What do we say? They've passed away. We use that kind of terminology, but who's passed away? The body is there. Everything is there. So what has passed away? So even if you just leave aside everything else and you just talk about intuition, just by the way we act, the way we speak, the way we intuitively perceive the world, there's a sense in which we know I'm more than just this body. I'm more even than this mind. But not just that, there's also science. There's a lot of scientific evidence to show that consciousness goes beyond this body. One of the most famous and most eminent types of research into reincarnation was done by someone called Ian Stevenson. And you know what he did? He documented 5,000 cases of children having spontaneous past life memories. In other words, these are young kids who begin spontaneously remembering who they were in a previous life, where they lived, who they were married to, how they died. They remember all these details when they're very young. Sometimes, for example, a child in Africa may remember a previous life in China, for example. So Ian Stevenson, he comes, he notes down all the details, and he goes back in time to see whether such a person existed. And in 5,000 cases, he's found positive corroboration. Sometimes he's even taken a child to a place that they said they lived in their previous life, and that child, having never been to that place, can identify, this is where the town hall is, this is where the library is, this is where the hospital is, this is the house where I lived. How's that possible? Clearly showing that there's some kind of intelligence, some kind of experience that's being carried over. There are also many studies done into this, out-of-body experiences. There's many cardiologists. There's one, Francis Crick. He does, I think that's his name. He does a whole study into this, of how in many cases when someone is undergoing a cardiac arrest, so for example, all their mental and physical activity has stopped, at a time when they're declared clinically dead, they do a cardiac arrest to try to bring them back to life. The person comes back to life, but the amazing thing is, when they come back to life, they begin explaining everything that was going on in the operating theatre. They begin to explain, the doctor said this person came in, you had this kind of conversation. They are perceiving everything that happened to them in the theatre at a time when they were clinically dead. How's that possible? It again indicates that there's some consciousness which goes beyond the physical frame. And then there are many other scientific things like xenoglossy. I don't know if you've heard of this, but this is, for example, children who grow up with incredible innate abilities. So for example, a child may grow up in a certain part of the world and they're able to speak a language from their youth, from a completely opposite part of the world that they've never had any contact with. Sometimes children can even speak a language in a country on the other side of the world in a dialect that's not even spoken on the earth at this point in time. How is that possible? Again indicating that there must be something that we're bringing into this life in terms of knowledge and understanding. So when we talk about the soul, when we talk about consciousness beyond the body, when we talk about reincarnation, we're not just talking about a religious belief. We're talking about something that is actually also grounded in science. The Bhagavad Gita also talks about how we can begin to see our experiences also pointing towards these things. In this life, we all have abilities, we all have facilities, and we all accept different identities. Through our journey of life, we're gifted these different things. But do you notice one thing happens to all of these things? And what's that? What one thing happens to all of these things that we're gifted in our life?
It's taken away.
They're taken away. At one point, everything is taken away. And why is it taken away? According to the Bhagavad Gita, these things are taken away from us to help us understand that this is not who we are. In other words, everything temporary, everything ethereal, everything superficial, everything superfluous to who we actually are has no existence in eternity. In other words, who you really are is that which is left after all these temporary things are taken away. And so the Bhagavad Gita also says by experience we can begin to understand that we're something beyond this body. And when we talk about reincarnation, the soul, this is not just the belief of the Bhagavad Gita. Many world religions talk about this idea that this life is just a chapter. If you look at, for example, the Sufi tradition within Islam, if you look at some even Christian theologians like Origen of Alexandria, they talked about reincarnation. If you look in Buddhist traditions, of course, reincarnation is there. Even mystic Judaism, things like Kabbalah, talk about reincarnation and the soul. So what we're talking about here is not an isolated idea of a specific geographical location, but something that's corroborated in many religions and also many ancient civilizations. If you look at Roman civilization, if you look at Greek civilization, Greek philosophers like Socrates were huge proponents. When they tried to poison Socrates and kill him, he said, "Catch me if you can, because all you can do is kill the body, but you can never kill me because I'm the soul, I'm beyond this body." If you look at Druids, if you look at even African civilizations, many of them talk about reincarnation and the soul. So what we're presenting to you here is something which shifts paradigms, because remember, if you want to be successful, you have to know your purpose. And if you want to know your purpose, first you have to know what's your identity. And so what Krishna teaches Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita is that our purpose or our dharma is twofold. Most people are just looking for their material purpose. I'm going to do this career, I'm going to live in this place, I'm going to achieve this position in society, I'm going to leave this influence in the world, and that's what they define as success. Now what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita is that there's nothing wrong with that. But that Svadharma is the purpose which is dealing with the physical and the mental aspect of your being. But beyond that, we each have a Sanatan Dharma, a spiritual purpose, an inner purpose, a universal purpose, a purpose which is beyond just this chapter of life, a purpose of self-realization. And so the idea is that to really be successful in your life, the idea is to understand both of these dharmas and bring them together. When we understand that we're spiritual beings on a human journey, then we can achieve the highest success. So ancient literatures like the Bhagavad Gita help us to fulfill our immediate duties, how to navigate the immediate situation of the world, but they also help us to explore and ultimately fulfill our ultimate aspirations, our deepest spiritual callings. And so real success means not just to deal with the material side of life, but real success means to understand that beyond that material we're spiritual beings, and therefore we have a deeper success that each one of us can pursue. And if we do both things side by side, then we'll understand how to fulfill our role in this world. Each one of us have a role in this world, but each one of us also have an identity in eternity, and that's basically the consciousness and the awareness that we're spiritual beings. Okay, let me stop there because I've said quite a lot there. Today we were just talking about identity, to understand that we have these two aspects, and I talked very much about the soul and about how we're all on a journey. We're just in a transit lounge. According to ancient literature, this world is just a temporary place. We all came and existed from another place. We came here. Here we're trying to find happiness, and after this life we'll continue to move on. And the idea is that this spiritual knowledge can help us to fulfill our greatest potential in this chapter that we have currently. All right, so let me take a few questions. Perhaps you have some doubts, or maybe you would like more clarification on any of these spiritual aspects I've talked about. So I'd be happy to hear from all of you. So shall we start with you? Is your question still there?
It's just, I was confused when you said that, like when you see something, it's not necessarily what you're seeing, but there's like something beyond that. So, and then when you hear something, it's not necessarily what you're perceiving, but more of like what's beyond. So I was kind of confused as to what you meant here, because at the end of the day, we have sensory receptors that take in that stimuli, and it gets converted to impulses, which
Mhm.
gets into your brain,
Mhm.
gets interpreted.
Mm-hmm.
So what's beyond could be involved in that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. I'm just looking for a blank slide here where I can write something. Okay, let me write here. Slideshow from current. Okay, so what was I talking about there? Okay, so basically what I'm talking about is there are objects in the world. Okay, let's just say, for example, there are objects or experiences. Not experiences, let me say events. Okay, yeah, so there are objects and events, right? And then there is a sense, which is perceiving that thing, right? What I'm saying is, what's behind this? Who's behind? Who's behind that sensory perception? Say, for example, when you were a kid, your mum may have come to you and started speaking to you. And then your mum at some point in the conversation may have said something like, "Are you listening?" So what does she mean, are you listening? Of course you're listening, because your ears are open and you're right in front of her. But when she says, "Are you listening?" what is she referring to? Not just the sensory perception of what you're hearing, but she's asking, are you the person, the identity, the perceiver behind it? Are you registering what I'm saying? So the point I'm making is that, who is that person that is listening? Is it the sense of the ear that's listening? When your mum says, "Are you listening?" is she asking, is your ear listening? Or is she asking, are you the person who has an ear? Are you listening? That's the point I'm making. That by intuition, we understand that the senses are simply instruments that we're using. The ear may be the physical instrument, but it's not actually that thing which is picking up the information and digesting it. That is something beyond the ear. Right? For example, when you see someone and it's like love at first sight. So is it your eyes that are falling in love? No. You're the person who has those eyes. The eyes allow you to perceive something about someone that then moves you. And who is that you? Right? So, or you listen to a piece of music and it makes you feel like, oh, wow. So what is that? Is that the ears? Or is that the person who's experiencing what comes through the ears? So by intuition, we all understand that we're something beyond the senses. We can't just be a machine. Yet the world, what it does is it kind of convinces us that we're a machine, that we just matter. And it completely neglects to actually identify who we really are. But if you don't know who you are, how can you be happy? It's like, imagine if you go into a phone shop and you say, "I need a battery for my phone." What's the first thing they're going to ask you? What phone do you have? Right? And if you say, like, don't ask such deep philosophical, ethereal questions, like, don't ask me such, profound, musings at this time, just give me a battery. Yeah, they could give you a battery, but how do you know it's going to work? Because if you want it to work, first you have to know what kind of phone you have. So the amazing thing in life is that people run for happiness. They make up a list of what they're going to do in life to be happy. without first asking the question, who am I? Isn't that amazing? It's like, imagine you get in a car, you start driving, and then, after driving for like 5 hours, you begin to think like, where should I go? No, like, you should have figured all of that out before you get in the car and you start driving. You should know your destination. So therefore, in the world today, sorry, I'm just messing around with this. I haven't got the right equipment today. In the world today, what happens is the world, there's why, there's how, and there's what. And what the world does today is it pushes you to chase this, the what and the how. What are you going to be when you grow up? Oh, I'm going to be this. How are you going to do it? I'm going to go to university. Yeah, okay, that's all fine. But have you asked why? The most intelligent person starts with why. Why am I even doing this in the first place? There's a story that a teacher once told all the students, can you draw a picture of what you want to be when you grow up? So the first student came and drew a pilot, said, I want to be a pilot. The other one drew up another picture of a mechanic, said, I want to fix cars. The other one said, I want to be a teacher, just like you, as a teacher with a blackboard. And the final student came up and drew a circle with 2 dots and a smile. And the teacher said, what's this? He said, you said, what do we want to be when we grow up? The person said, this is what I want to be. He said, what's that? The person said, the child said, I want to be happy. And the teacher said, you didn't understand the assignment. And the child looked back at the teacher and said, you didn't understand life. That's the point. Because we draw up our lists. What are you going to do? What are you going to achieve? What job are you going to do? Yeah, but why? Why are you doing all of this in the first place? And you can't answer the question why unless you know who you are. And therefore, the most pressing question in life, before you go anywhere, is to understand who you are. Because if you don't know that, you may just be, in English they say, barking down the wrong street. And that's what most people do. They look back at their life and they have regrets. They have regrets. Because they look back at their life and I said, I spent my whole life doing this. Why? Maybe if I had first asked, who am I and why am I pursuing everything I'm pursuing, then I may have got the how and the what much more clearer. So therefore our spiritual teacher, he went to a university, Massachusetts Institute for Technology, and he said, where is the department in this university which teaches you who you are? We ain't got that department. We've got technology, we've got engineering, we've got history, we've got everything under the sun. We don't have a department which teaches you who you are. Then where are you going? Maybe you'll end up going nowhere very fast. Martin Luther King once said, now we have guided missiles and misguided men. We know how to move fast, we know how to do many things, but are we moving in the right direction? That requires some thoughtfulness. So anyway, sorry, that was a long answer to your question. But did it make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah. Anyone else have any questions about reincarnation, about the soul? You can also challenge me. I like to...
Talk about how souls pass from one body to another.
Mm-hmm.
If we had to look at it in a world points perspective, the population is always growing. Wouldn't there be too little souls for the amount of population that we have?
Okay, it's a very logical question. So, if the population is growing, you say there's a certain amount of souls who are reincarnating, but the population is growing. How does that work? Does that mean new souls are coming about? But you said the souls are eternal, so how does that all work? The first thing is to realize that souls are not just in human bodies. Anything that's living has a soul in it. So a human is a soul. An animal is also a soul. Even a tree is a soul, because there can't be life without the soul. And therefore, human population increasing is neither here nor there, because that doesn't signify the totality of souls. Human bodies are just one type of car. So, does that make sense? Yeah, so the human population increasing has no relation to the number of souls, because that's just one type of car, like that. So, and this is also another really important point, that in the world, why is this knowledge that we're sharing here so important, that we're not the body, but we are the soul? Why is this knowledge so important? Because if people actually understood this, would you have sexism? No, because it's based on the body. Would you have racism? No, because it's based on the body. Would you have ageism? No, because it's based on the body. Would you have nationalism? No, because it's based on the body. Because people haven't understood this basic knowledge that we are not this body, we're spiritual beings. There's so many problems in the world. And so this is why all spiritual literature begins with this foundational understanding of understanding who we really are. So I hope, does that answer your question? All right, thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi. I kind of missed the whole thing.
No worries.
Sorry. But I'm just interested in what you spoke about just now.
Uh-huh.
So, in that graphic, we are souls that possess a body. And this is a spiritual conversation. The soul and the spirit, do you think that they are two separate entities, or is it one thing?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I guess it's a matter of terminology. When we generally use the term soul and spirit, we're talking about, we're using them as synonyms. However, so when we talk about spirit, we're talking about that which is beyond the material, that which is anti-material, that which is metaphysical, right? So when we talk about spirit, we're talking about the soul. The soul is made of spirit, and the spirit is a soul. Therefore, in our books, you will hear the terminology spirit, soul. So spirit means soul. But sometimes in the world today, when they talk about spirits, they may be talking about a soul inside a subtle body. So for example, a ghost. Sometimes people ask, what is a ghost? Right, so remember I was showing you this. A ghost is basically an entity, a soul that has a subtle body but doesn't have a gross body. That's basically what a ghost is. I'm just sharing this for you, yeah? So sometimes people, when they talk about spirits, what they sometimes are referring to is a soul in a subtle body, is like a spirit, kind of like a disembodied entity, a ghostly kind of spirit. That's what they kind of are referring to. So in modern terminology, sometimes spirit refers to this, a disembodied being. But in the purest terminology, spirit and soul is the same, because spirit means metaphysical. And even the mind is physical, it's material. The mind is not spiritual. The mind is just subtle material interface that we're using. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you take it? All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Any questions? Yes?
Hi. So, since you have gone through your journey, right, and you're probably a bit like way further than we are in what you're doing, so I'm wondering what you think your why is and who you think you are.
Thank you. Well, first thing is I was just like all of you. I studied at university. I studied at UCL in London. And when I was, when I was 15, I started having questions of life. I saw the things that people were pursuing, the lives that people were creating for themselves, somehow or other by karma. I grew up in a family in which people had two of everything, 2 houses, 2 cars, 2 phones, too much. You know, and I saw all these people who materially had everything, but who, to me, were living very dissatisfied lives. So I grew up with this, and I'm like, am I just going to do this? I can achieve everything they've achieved. I can get all of the positions and accolades but it doesn't seem to make them happy. So from a young age, I was always questioning things. And so when I was 18, I went to university. So I was sitting in lecture theatres just like you. And well, you're all students, so you know what it's like. When you're at university, then you experience all the sides of life. So one day I was at a nightclub, and then the next morning I was at a monastery. Because I was exploring all the angles of life, you know. So in our monasteries, the first service of the day starts at 4:30 in the morning. So I remember on one particular night, I went to a nightclub and exited the nightclub at 3:30 in the morning and decided to go straight to the monastery for the first service of the day. I was living in central London, we had a monastery there. And I just was comparing 2 approaches to life. I was like, here are a certain group of people trying really hard to be happy, and here are another group of people who just seem to be experiencing a much more natural, effortless, joyful existence. And so it was a really revealing time in my life because I saw 2 approaches. And then when I was 21, I went to India. I traveled around, lived in monasteries and met many spiritual people. And then I decided to become a monk. So I didn't think I'd be a monk my whole life. I thought I'd try it out for 6 months, and then 6 months became a year, which became 2, which became 5, which became 15, and I've been a monk for, I guess, over 25 years now, roughly like that. But all of you may not. That may not be your journey. The goal of life is not to be a monk. The goal of life is to understand what unique abilities, what unique contribution you can make in the world, right? So, when you take your passion, which is what you love doing, and then when you take your ability, which is what you're really good at, and when you think, what contribution can I make to the world? What can I do as service to the world? Then you see this? That is your dharma. That's your purpose. And so for some people, being an investment banker might be their purpose. But they don't become an investment banker just to earn lots of zeros on their bank account. They become an investment banker, and then they use their position, their influence, their network to basically proliferate greater understanding in the world. So we have spiritual investment bankers, they do exist. We have monks, we have people who are teachers, we have people who are lecturers, we have people in all walks of life. So for me, when I was 21, I resonated with monastic life. Simple living for me was just very natural for me. I realized that teaching, sharing knowledge for me just excited me. I realized that by the grace of God I had some small ability in this, so I should try and utilize it. And therefore, what is my purpose? I try to share wisdom that breathes. I try to share ancient knowledge with people in a way that relates to their life, in a way which is practically applicable, and in a way which empowers them to unleash their potential. And so what do I do morning to evening? I just go wherever I can, where people are willing to listen, and I try to share wisdom. Because my firm conviction is that if you get empowered with wisdom, you can unlock amazing amounts of potential in yourself. But nowadays, people don't discuss wisdom. We tell people small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, but great minds discuss wisdom. And then they see all the events, experiences, emotions, and people of life through that lens of wisdom. And so that's what I'm trying to do. So here we are in South Africa. I'm here for a couple of weeks. So we'll go to universities, we'll go to corporate firms, we'll go to all kinds of places, and we'll just share wisdom. Because deep inside everyone's heart is a vacuum. They say smiling faces, crying hearts. So deep inside people, there's a sense that something's missing. But what the world tells you to do is don't question it. Don't challenge it. Just keep going. Just carry on. Everything will work out. And that's what the world teaches us to do. But those doubts, that sense of vacuum, that sense that there's something more to life I'm missing, that's very good. Because that's what causes you to then question and find and unlock a potential that you never knew was there. So that's what we try and do. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Is that a hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. What advice would you give to a 35-year-old black man who is intending to go on a journey of discovery to become a monk?
Amazing. We'll talk later on. In ancient spiritual culture, did you know that everyone lived as a monk?
No.
Yeah. In ancient spiritual culture, everyone spent some point of their life, whether it was 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, living in that monastic environment. Because what happens in the world we're living in today, sorry, I keep doing this just to get a blank. Let me just clear. What happens in the world we're living in today is that there's so much noise around us. There are opinions, there are expectations, there are traditions, there are responsibilities. And all of these things are so loud that what happens is you forget to hear your heart. So in spiritual culture, everyone lived some time in a monastic life, some time in solitude, some time away from all of these noises, some time to actually explore, who am I? What am I meant to do in this life? And then some people would remain as monks for their whole life, and many others would say after 6 months, I've heard my heart, I've understood my purpose, now I'm ready to come out in the world and make an amazing contribution. So what would my advice be to you? Go for it. Do it. find an environment, find a habitat, find a space where you can hear your heart. Hear from teachers, hear from wisdom literatures, challenge. They say the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, we've always done it this way. No, we don't always have to do it this way. And when you take time for nowadays people don't like solitude. People are scared of solitude. People are scared of being alone because they think alone means lonely. No. Alone means opportunity to hear your heart. And so I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage everyone to do that. And even if you're not going to be a monk and live in a monastery, at least get yourself into an environment where you can begin to challenge everything the world has told you to be. Now, I'm not saying that these are always bad. I'm not saying that. We need people's opinions. It's good that people have expectations of us. Tradition is also, there's many good things in that. But when this hijacks everything and we don't hear our heart, you might end up looking back at your life 50 years later thinking, I lived someone else's life. I didn't live my life. They say you're born an original, don't die a copy. So that's the point. So we eat, like the reason we're really happy to come here and speak to all of you is because all of you haven't made your decisions in life yet. You are in a privileged position. Most people out there, they hear about all of these things once they've made all their decisions, and then they're living in what is a prison. But you haven't. You have your whole life ahead of you. You can decide what occupation, where you want to live, what goals you want to pursue. You can do that. And you can set your, but remember that archer has to pull back before it shoots. And therefore, forums like this are incredibly empowering because you can set a conscious direction for your life and do something amazing. And everyone is a genius. Einstein said everyone is a genius. But if you convince a fish that it has to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it's a failure. So what often happens is we try to copy someone else's life instead of finding our own. So in short, go for it.
Thank you.
Wish you the best. Thank you very much. Appreciate being with you. Thank you so much.